On November 26, 2019, Rexburg, Idaho. Lori Vallow's name didn't mean much to most people until the day police knocked on her door. It was a November morning. Officers arrived at Lori Vallow's apartment, looking for her two missing children, Tylee Ryan, a smart and lively 17-year-old, and JJ Vallow, her bright 7-year-old son, who had autism and a smile that could light up a room. What started as a simple welfare check would change everything. Lori answered the door. She was calm and polite. She told police that JJ was staying with a friend in Arizona and that Tylee was busy with school. But the detectives quickly learned that wasn't true. His friends hadn't seen JJ in months. No one could reach Tylee. The kids' belongings, clothes, toys, even JJ's service dog were still in the apartment. As detectives started asking different questions, Lori's story began to fall apart. But how did it get to this point? How does a mother become the center of a national mystery? Just months before, Lori Vallow looked like any other mom. She posed for family photos, cheered her kids on at school, and posted smiling pictures on social media. But behind the scenes, her life had become a whirlwind of secrets, loss, and strange new beliefs. In July 2019, Lori's husband, Charles Vallow, died suddenly in Arizona. Lori's brother, Alex Cox, claimed he shot Charles in self-defense, but nothing about the story made sense to Charles's friends and family. Charles had told police that Lori believed the world was ending soon, and that he had become a zombie, a term Lori used to describe people she thought were possessed or controlled by evil. He begged for help, saying Lori's new religious ideas were getting dangerous. Not long after Charles's death, Lori packed up Tylee and JJ and moved from Arizona to Rexburg, Idaho. She said it was for a fresh start, but instead of settling down, Lori's life became even stranger. She grew close to Chad Daybell, a quiet man who wrote self-published books about the end of the world. Chad believed he could see light and dark spirits in people. He and Lori spent hours talking about doomsday prophecies, secret missions, and the coming apocalypse. Friends noticed changes in Lori. She became obsessed with Chad's beliefs. She started calling people zombies and claimed some were no longer really themselves. She even told one friend that JJ and Tylee had dark spirits and that the end was near. As summer turned to fall, people around Lori began to disappear or die. In October, Chad's wife, Tammy Daybell, was found dead in her sleep. Chad said it was a natural cause, but her friends and family were shocked. Just 2 weeks later, Lori and Chad got married on a sunny beach in Hawaii. In the wedding photos, Lori looked carefree and happy, but Tylee and JJ were missing from the pictures and from everyone's lives. Back in Idaho, JJ's grandparents, Kay and Larry Woodcock, grew worried. They hadn't heard from JJ in weeks. Calls and texts went unanswered. On November 26, 2019, they finally called the police in Rexburg and asked for a welfare check. That's when the questions really began. Why did Lori keep lying about where her kids were? Why did she and Chad leave town so suddenly, abandoning the kids' clothes, toys, and even JJ's service dog? Why did so many people close to Lori end up dead or missing? The case exploded on the news. Reporters camped outside Lori's empty apartment. The faces of JJ and Tylee appeared on TV screens and social media across the country. Hashtags like #where are the kids started trending. People everywhere wanted answers. As police searched for JJ and Tylee, they uncovered a web of secrets, lies, and tragedy. Lori Vallow, once just a regular mom, was now at the center of a true crime story that would grip the world. And as the search grew more desperate, one question echoed from Idaho to Hawaii and beyond. Where were JJ and Tylee? And what really happened in the Vallow home? After the welfare check, things moved fast and got even stranger. Instead of staying in Rexburg to help police, Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell packed up and left town almost overnight. They didn't tell friends or neighbors. They didn't leave a note. They just vanished, leaving behind JJ and Tylee's clothes, toys, and even JJ's service dog. It was as if someone had pressed pause on the kids' lives, then walked away. The police were now very worried. They started searching Lori's apartment and talking to anyone who might know where the kids were. Reporters and news cameras camped outside, and soon the story was everywhere. All over the country, people were asking, "Where are JJ and Tylee?" As investigators looked deeper, they found that Lori and Chad's lives were full of secrets. The adults around them were either missing or dead. Just months before, Lori's brother, Alex Cox, had shot and killed Lori's husband, Charles Vallow, in Arizona. Alex said it was self-defense, but Charles's friends thought something felt wrong. Charles himself had told police he feared for his life, worrying that Lori's new religious beliefs were making her dangerous. Now, in Idaho, another death didn't add up. Chad Daybell's wife, Tammy, had died in her sleep in October. Chad said she'd gone peacefully, but friends and family thought she'd been healthy. Police weren't sure, so they made a big decision. They exhumed Tammy's body for a second autopsy. The results would take months, but police suspected foul play. Meanwhile, Lori and Chad were living it up in Hawaii. News cameras caught them walking hand in hand on the beach. They looked relaxed, even happy, while police and family were desperate for answers. When Lori was found, a judge ordered her to show her children to the court within 5 days. Lori ignored the order. She didn't tell anyone where JJ and Tylee were. She didn't seem worried. Back in Idaho, tension was rising. JJ's grandparents, Kay and Larry Woodcock, begged for help on national TV. Police raised the reward for information. People held candlelight vigils for the missing kids. The hashtag #Where Are the Kids was everywhere. It was around this time that police started to understand the scope of Lori and Chad's beliefs. Friends and relatives told detectives that Chad believed the world was ending soon and that some people were light and others dark. Lori called people zombies if she thought they were controlled by evil spirits. She even told friends that JJ and Tylee were no longer really her children. It was chilling. The investigation stretched across several states. Police checked security cameras, flight records, phone messages, and even searched Yellowstone National Park, the last place Tylee had been seen alive. But every lead ended the same way, with more questions and no sign of the kids. Then, another twist. In December, Lori's brother Alex Cox died suddenly in Arizona. His death was ruled natural causes, pulmonary embolism, but the timing was suspicious. By now, every death or disappearance around Lori seemed connected. Detectives kept pushing. They searched Chad's property, combed through family emails, and looked at every detail of Lori's and Chad's lives. But the answers stayed hidden until one summer morning, months after JJ and Tylee first vanished. On June 9, 2020, police got a search warrant for Chad Daybell's house in Salem, Idaho. Neighbors saw officers, FBI agents, and dogs combing the yard. They dug in the dirt. They brought out shovels, tents, and evidence bags. For hours, the world watched and waited, hoping for good news. But what police found that day would turn hope into heartbreak and take this case from a missing persons mystery to something even darker. June 9, 2020, Salem, Idaho. Police, FBI, and local officers surrounded Chad Daybell's house. Neighbors watched as search dogs paced the backyard, and officers marked off the dirt with yellow tape. Chad tried to act calm, but his nerves showed. Hours passed as officers dug in 2 separate spots. The crowd was silent when investigators set up a tent over one of the holes. Soon after, the worst fears were confirmed. Buried under the earth were the remains of 2 children, JJ Vallow and Tylee Ryan. JJ's body was wrapped in black plastic, bound with duct tape. Tylee's remains had been burned and dismembered, buried in a shallow grave, making identification difficult. The medical examiner confirmed both children had been murdered. The discovery shattered any last hope. JJ was 7, Tylee was 17. Their faces, once seen on missing posters and news segments, now symbolized a tragedy that had stunned the nation. Lori Vallow, the mother who once posted smiling family photos, was now accused of her children's murders. Chad Daybell was arrested at the scene. Video showed him sitting in a police car, staring ahead, his life as a free man over. Lori, already in jail for child abandonment, faced new charges: conspiracy, murder, and destruction of evidence. The world wanted to know, how did this happen? How could a mother and her new husband believe 2 children were zombies and needed to die? Details emerged from text messages between Chad and Lori. They talked about missions, dark spirits, and removing evil. Lori's beliefs had twisted so far, she saw her own children as threats to her future. The investigation grew. Police reopened the case of Chad Daybell's sudden death. Friends described Tammy as healthy and energetic, until her death in October 2019. Chad married Lori just weeks after Tammy's funeral. Detectives began to suspect Tammy's death, like Charles Vallow's, was no accident. Alex Cox, Lori's brother, was also gone dead from what was ruled natural causes in December 2019. He had shot Charles, and now any answers he might have held were lost forever. The courtroom drama began. Lori and Chad's lawyers claimed they were innocent, but the evidence was damning. Investigators presented text messages, location pings, and witness accounts. Lori's silence spoke volumes. She never told police where her children were, never led anyone to their graves, and never showed remorse. The families of JJ and Tylee grieved in public. JJ's grandparents, Kay and Larry Woodcock, became advocates for missing children, demanding justice. Tylee's friends remembered her as bright, funny, and protective of her little brother. Memorials and vigils were held from Idaho to Louisiana. The story also became a cautionary tale about unchecked beliefs. Lori and Chad's obsession with doomsday prophecies isolated them from reality. They convinced themselves that violence was justified by a higher mission. Their circle grew smaller, their thinking darker, and their lies more desperate. News of the case traveled everywhere: TV, podcasts, social media. True crime fans dissected every court document and interview. The world watched every court date, every press conference, waiting for justice. But even with the children found and charges filed, the case was far from over. Lori and Chad's trials were delayed as new evidence surfaced. The prosecution built its case, determined to prove both were responsible for the deaths of JJ, Tylee, and possibly Chad Daybell. Questions remained. Why did no one stop Lori sooner? How did Chad convince so many people he had special knowledge? What warning signs did people miss? As the legal battle loomed, the families of JJ and Tylee held on to each other, hoping that telling the truth would finally bring peace. The next act would play out in a crowded courtroom, with the world watching, as Lori Vallow faced the possibility of spending the rest of her life behind bars for the deaths of her own children. April 2023, Boise, Idaho. The courthouse was full. Reporters, family members, and the public all wanted to see the end of a story that had haunted them for years. Lori Vallow entered the courtroom in a plain suit, flanked by guards. Her face was calm, sometimes even smiling, but her eyes seemed empty. The trial began with the prosecution outlining their case. Lori, along with Chad Daybell, had plotted and carried out the murders of JJ Vallow and Tylee Ryan, as well as Chad's own wife, Chad Daybell. The motive, they argued, was rooted in bizarre religious beliefs, greed, and a desire to remove anyone who stood in their way. Witnesses took the stand. Friends described how Lori changed after meeting Chad, becoming obsessed with his doomsday visions. They testified that Lori began to believe her children and even her husband were zombies, possessed by evil spirits. Text messages between Lori and Chad were read aloud, where they discussed missions, removing evil, and starting a new life together. The jury saw photos of the Daybell property, heard from the detectives who had dug up the backyard, and listened to experts describe how the bodies were concealed. The evidence was overwhelming. Location data, cell phone records, digital messages, and forensic proof all pointed toward Lori and Chad. The defense tried to argue that Lori was manipulated by Chad, that she was a loving mother caught in a web of lies. But Lori never took the stand. Throughout the trial, she showed little emotion, not when the photos were shown, not when the messages were read, Not even when the families of JJ and Tylee spoke about their loss. The jury deliberated for only a few hours. On May 12, 2023, they delivered their verdict, guilty on all counts. Lori Vallow was convicted of murder, conspiracy, and grand theft for collecting Social Security benefits after the children's deaths. The judge sentenced her to life in prison with no chance of parole. She will never leave prison again. Chad Daybell's trial is scheduled for 2024. He faces the death penalty, still claiming his innocence. For the families of JJ and Tylee, the verdict brought relief, but not true peace. Kay and Larry Woodcock, JJ's grandparents, continue to speak out for missing children and advocate for stronger laws to protect kids in danger. Lori Vallow remains in prison, appealing her conviction, but most legal experts say her chances for release are slim. Chad Daybell awaits his own judgment. If you want to hear more true crime stories that matter, subscribe and share your thoughts below. What lessons do you think we should learn from the Lori Vallow case?